the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Yeah, coming up in just a few moments, Doug Hinderer will be stopping by if you are having problems in your relationship, your marriage. Doug's going to be joining us a few years ago. I remember learning on the show that the first business Monday of the new year, you know what that is? The first business Monday of the new year? It's what divorce lawyers call divorce day. Apparently what happens is that people who are on the verge of divorce, they wait until after Thanksgiving and Christmas. They get through the holidays for the family or the kids, then they file the paperwork, right? So the divorce lawyers, they sell this as a chance to become happy. Divorce not only breaks up a couple, it also breaks up families, right? Children are caught and affected by the trauma of two adults that they assume would stay together forever, and they get messed up. And you've probably seen it too. People in their 40s and 50s today who grew up with divorced parents testify about what those divorces did to their lives. And it's not just the children, it's the families. It complicates relationships and a whole litany of other things. Here to help you, if you are going through this right now, is Doug Hinderer. He is a licensed marriage family therapist in Illinois. He is going to be here on Relevant Radio, and he's on Saturdays, 11 a.m. And, of course, you can join him on the same number I'm about to give you. You can join us at 888-914-9149. That's 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 Eastern. Feel free to tap into what a lot of people pay money for, some incredible advice and insight. And, Doug, it's so good to have you with me today, and it's great to also have you on the air with us today. Are you excited about your show?
You know what, Drew, I really am. And I never in my life had I ever thought about having a radio show at all. And Drew, I think we'd be able to accomplish a lot of good things, touch a lot of lives, help people, kind of bring some order and peace into their marriage. And, that's the deal. And I think we're going to try to strengthen marriages. People can call in, talk about what they're struggling with, what's not going well. And we can, share some ideas and hear from listeners about what they've done with similar issues and how they've strengthened their marriage as well. So I'm really excited.
Let's talk divorce right now. I mean, divorce numbers are down a little bit. The percentages are down slightly. And I think in some respects, people aren't marrying as much. People are cohabitating as part of it. But for those who decide to break up, whether they are married or they're cohabitating, what's the biggest cause? What are you seeing? Is it money? Is it infidelity? Is it lack of forgiveness? Is it communication? What is it?
Yeah. That's a really good question, Drew. And one of the things when I'm doing marriage prep work that I tell a couple they should talk about is divorce. And would you ever divorce me? And if so, what would you divorce me for? Right? Nobody goes into marriage thinking they'll get divorced. But yet 40 to 50% of first-time marriages end that way. There's a lot of reasons. There's probably a dozen different reasons. I think it boils down to, a couple of things. But one is I'm just not happy with you anymore. And I've got a right to be happy. And so I'm going to divorce you and go find someone who I can be happy with. We live in a culture that says you should not have to suffer. There should be no difficulties in your life. If you have a headache, we have a pill for that, whatever it is. And, when marriage gets difficult and you've got to work at it and it's not exactly what you thought it would be, which it never is exactly what anybody thinks it will be. We're like, well, I must have married the wrong person. I think I'll just go find the right person. That's number one. I think number two is lack of forgiveness. I think, and our Lord put his finger right on it in the passage in the gospel where I think it's the Pharisee said, hey, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? He said, no. He said, well, how come Moses then allowed the man to issue a bill of divorce and dismiss his wife? And the Lord said, well, from the beginning it wasn't so, but because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your spouse. And that hardness of heart is the reason. Every couple I've worked with that hasn't made it is because one of them, or both, but usually it's just one, their heart has turned to stone. They've been unhappy for so long. They've suffered for so long. They've had so much pain that they finally, their heart just got cut off from oxygen. And now my heart, where it comes to you, has turned to stone, and I can't get that back. I can't breathe life. This hardness of heart is, however you get there, ultimately is, I think, the thing that causes one person to say, I can't do it anymore. I'm done.
Wow. Doug will take our first call today from the Midwest. Mary has got a good question for you. Hi, Mary.
Hi, how are you, Drew? Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question about sex addiction. And, of course, this doesn't help a marriage at all, and had my suspicions for, well, since, you sort of start the relationship now. Yeah. So it's many, many years of being with this man who's passed away. And I think it all starts with abuse as a child. Didn't want to really address it, had a personality who was very strong, thought he could do everything on his own, but I realized how many addictions he really had. It wasn't just this, it was drugs, alcohol, work, eating. It goes on and on. And when it finally came out that he had an affair, not that you don't have suspicions that it was emotional. I'm not saying that there's each party doesn't have something, but he would never address this or go to a counselor. He said he always would. We would go, but it never happened. I think people need to be aware of this at some point.
So Mary, did his sexual addiction, did that create infidelity in your relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
I think even when it first started, when you're first dating and doing things, and he was already having these infidelities, still keeping all these people from the past in his life and new encounters and going away and working odd hours, and hiding money. I've realized to support the addiction. I've come to realize.
Well, Mary, let's do this. I want Doug to address this for you. Doug, two things that resonate with me, and maybe you can shine some light on them for her. Sure. She also mentioned before she even got married, her spouse was, being unfaithful. So that's a major red flag. And when it comes to therapy, I think people need to be aware of the history, and there's signs before you even get married you should be looking at, but also sexual addiction and a healthy sex life. That makes for a strong relationship as well. So maybe address the sexual component of relationships, and I'm sure pornography is affecting and poisoning relationships, and there's infidelity in that way. So maybe let's talk about the sexual component of a strong and healthy relationship.
Yeah, we talk about the 4 different loves that are important in a marriage. And it's friendship, and then kindness, and then eros, which is the physical love between a husband and a wife, is a very important part of what married love is all about. And it's the part of love that only you and your spouse share. You can have a love of friendship with a lot of people, love of kindness. You can have sacrificial love, agape love of intimacy, the love of eros you share with just one person, which makes it so sacred and so special. That to violate that is the very meaning of marriage itself, right? And people's behavioral patterns prior to marriage tend to keep going after marriage. And so, if you've got someone who, say, abuses alcohol before they're married, they're probably going to abuse alcohol after. This area of sexual addiction, Drew, I think is one of the biggest challenges now, and it's because of pornography. Pornography is, in my opinion, the most addictive substance, if you will, on the planet. And there is some research out there that suggests it's even more addictive than heroin and cocaine because it affects more of the neural pathways in the brain. And the average age now that a young boy gets exposed to pornography is between 8 and 10 years of age, even long before puberty sets in. And all of a sudden, the neural pathways start getting affected during a developmental time in a young brain. And that can have lifelong implications. And so, with the internet, it is so frequent now. It's not a question of, will your son ever see pornography? It's a question of when. And we need to do a much better job of protecting our young men. And I grow up with this pornography thing, and in high school and college. And that really affects how I view women, how I view sexual intimacy someday with my wife. And then I've got all these ideas of what I think sex looks like based on what I've watched, but that's not true love. That's not sacrificial love. That's not being focused on what I can do to bring pleasure to my partner. That's focused on what I want to get and the latest thing that I've seen. And it destroys a lot of marriages. I'll tell you, I had a couple of couples that I worked with that this was the reason the marriage ended. And I remember talking to the one guy, Drew, and I had a appointment with him the afternoon after his divorce was finalized. And he said, you know what? He said, Doug, I got home about noon. And he said, my life was over. He said, I lost my wife. I lost my son. I I lost everything I cared about. And he said, I've never felt that low in my life. He said, the first thing I did was go to the computer and turn on my computer and go to my favorite porn star. His addiction was so intense that even when it cost him his wife and his son, he couldn't stop. And it destroys lives and families. It's a terrible plague.
Yeah, there is help and there is healing out there, and I hope if anyone is going through it right now that they will seek it. You know, when you talk of pornography, I often think of what John Paul II had said, that anyone who treats a person as the means to an end does violence to the essence of the others. And that's not true love. You know, it's not true love to use another human being. You know, it's quite the opposite. We'll move along. We'll grab another call. If you want to join us, feel free to dial in. It's 888-914-9149. We'll go to sunny Arizona next. Susie's there. Hi, Susie. Good afternoon.
I've been married for about 18 years to my husband. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, I would say we have a good marriage. But I feel like as time goes on, I feel like he's got some sort of a wall up, and he doesn't feel like, I feel like I can't connect with him emotionally. I've tried to say, let's do a couple's devotional. He used to have a job and he traveled a lot. And so when he was away for the season, I would say, let's watch church online together. We can talk about the service, or let's do a devotional or whatever, let's do a date night. It just feels like it's all on my shoulders to initiate that kind of stuff. And when I try to have conversations where I can try to emotionally connect with him, it's just like he just doesn't want to go there.
So, right.
Intimacy.
Generally it's the man who has a harder time connecting emotionally. Did he grow up in a family where, his mother, his father, was a lot of affection in the home he grew up in, or did he grow up in a home where there wasn't much affection?
I mean, I would say it was probably pretty typical. His mom was stay-at-home mom, a little bit more of a nurturer, but dad was didn't say I love you, didn't say I'm proud of you. They don't talk about anything uncomfortable.
So you never actually learned how to do it as a child.
Nope.
And now as an adult, it's important for him to do it. He just never learned how to do it. And I think, you know what, getting some counseling could be really helpful. The problem is generally men tend to be reluctant to do it because one of the biggest triggers in a man's life is this fear of failure. We hate failure more than anything in the world. And to say, wow, I need therapy, I need somebody to help me with my marriage, feels like this huge failure. So a lot of men are reluctant to go to therapy when it can be so beneficial. And part of it, I think if you kind of, couch it in terms of, boy, if you had a physical problem going on, you'd go see a doctor, right? And so we've got this emotionally, we're not really as close as we should be. What do we have to lose if we go and find somebody who can help us, right? And if we go once or twice, if we don't like the person, well, we just quit. So men tend to be very reluctant to do anything that would suggest that they're failing.
It's just been an issue for so long now that it has bled into our physical intimacy, and I feel like I'm almost numb and ready to throw in the towel. Not divorce or anything, but I just feel like we're just kind of roommates.
Right, and what I tell people, if things in the physical intimacy department aren't going well, generally means something's not going right in the kitchen. We're just not connecting as friends, and we're not being kind and gentle with each other. And if we're just not doing well in the kitchen, well, at bedtime, I'm not feeling all that interested, right? And so if you can focus on deepening friendship, have some date nights, deepen your interest in him, what's going on in his world, and so that he can feel safe, that he can talk to you about things that maybe aren't going perfect, and then maybe he'd be a little more willing to try some therapy for a little while. And I think part of this, when you talk about it, talk in terms of what's going on in your world as opposed to his. So you start off with the words, I feel, right? So I'm feeling distant from you, and I don't like that feeling. I want to feel very close to you, and I'm not feeling that right now. And I'm wondering if maybe we could talk about how we can get closer together and we can reconnect the way we did when we were newlyweds. And because I really miss that, and I really miss that closeness with you. So if you come from your perspective, what you're feeling, sometimes the man won't feel, and it goes either way as well, but your spouse won't feel threatened. They won't feel like they're failing. And, we all want to be a good spouse, right? We all want to be the best husband, best wife we can be. And if you can tell me that I'm kind of coming up short, but in a way that's not threatening, that doesn't make me feel like a failure, I'm more likely to listen to that and try to, do something about it.
All right. My guest today, Doug Hinderer. Hey, Susie, hang in there. We'll offer a prayer for your relationship too. And I'm glad you're addressing it. If you're going through a troubled time right now and you're listening, maybe it's your sibling or your child, or maybe your own marriage has grown tepid and cold, and you just need a little advice, a little direction. I'm speaking today with Doug Hinderer. He's got a brand new radio program. He's going to be joining Relevant Radio. We'll broadcast 11 a.m. Central Time on Saturdays here. You can always join him for that as well. It's called Marriage Unhindered. And it's a great title, Doug. I love it. Strengthen your marriage and making it heal.